And I think a lot of the reason we look down is because we're trying to think of something to say, or we don't know what to do with our bodies. So it's like, if I look down, they can't see me because I can't see me. You know, like a little kid when they play hide and seek, they figure, and my nephews are inspiration for that one. Angling your body away from others. This is probably more important when you're sitting versus standing, but have you ever noticed when you're in a classroom or, you know, talking over the dinner table, and you get that one person's kind of leaning in, they really seem engaged. They really seem like they're paying attention. Or if you have someone who's kind of shying away, kind of a little discomfortable, I think that has to do with the fact that they're trying to give themselves some physical distance and protect themselves. Now, it's not an uncomfortable thing necessarily, it's just subconscious that we might be portraying a disinterest in the topic, or maybe you don't believe that person, maybe you're kind of questioning their authority on what they're talking about. But I think especially with the interviews, you know, leaning in versus leaning back. Not saying you have to be across the desk, but just leaning slightly forward will project that interested demeanor. Now, fidgeting and touching your hair. Thankfully, I don't think I've caught any of you girls doing that. But I have some friends back home who, they're like doing this and flipping and doing that. And I know I sometimes fidget with the 2 or 3 loose hairs around the headband or whatever because it's like itching or driving me crazy. But for the most part, you know, it's just there. Leave it. If you really need to fix your hair, there's always a break at some point for you to go to the ladies' room and tidy it up. If it's really distracting, pull it back. When I was in the lab, I pretty much always had it in a ponytail or a bun. I actually at one point had cut it really short, which wasn't so flattering. But it was more to be practical. I just didn't have the time to be dealing with it. It was a distraction. Let me think here. Oh yes, invading other space. Now you may not run into this now, but you know, if you're like, pardon me, I'm going to be fresh. If you're less than a 1.5 feet away, this is wrong. I don't care if you're just leaning over your colleague's desk to talk to them. They're just not liking that. They may not say anything if they're really polite, but the reason is that there's just a comfort zone that we have. We're kind of giving, I'm not like totally into the whole aura thing, but we have kind of radiation that we give off. We have this sort of space that's ours. If you treat their possessions or their actual office space as if per your own, showing a sign of disrespect. Now, maybe if they're comfortable and they trust you and you know this, that's not so bad. But when you're first getting to know them in those first few weeks of the job, first few months, you might want to be a little bit more gingerly about that at first. I mean, if they're handing it to you and saying, yes, borrow my iPad, or, you know, here's my stapler, great. But if you're not saying, hey, can I grab that, before you run over and grab it from the desk, if you're doing it too many times, it's going to start to have an effect. So, you know, just kind of keep that in mind, that people do still want and have personal boundaries. They change over time, but initially you want to give that a little cushion. I mean, I don't know about you, but you probably don't like it when you're crammed on the bus or train and you got someone like right here in your face. No matter what you do, there's no way to get yourself like further away from them. And that's usually an uncomfortable ride home. But, you know, what can you do? That's public transportation. But when you're working in a workspace, generally you're allowed enough room to work so that isn't an issue. But I have worked in a lab bench where if I turn right around, there's another bench right here, and of course there's a technician right there. And every time a timer is going off, I'm checking an incubator, I'm going over to another machine to wash pipettes. I only had so many minutes to interact, and we got to the point where we worked like a fine machine to not ever bump into each other, to always have just enough space. But it took time and effort, and I think when they saw that I was making that effort, they appreciated it more. And so when you do have to share workspace, you know, just kind of keep that in mind. Other than that, you know, glancing at the clock. I don't think there's a clock in here, but your watch or your digital device counts. And so if you can, try to avoid doing it. Try not to get caught, please. But I mean, it's just a matter of people have places to be. Their time is important as yours is too. And when you're with someone, you're having a meeting, let's say you're having a quick half-hour coffee talk with someone, be respectful of time. I know, we have this whole running late thing. I'm the same way. I always have to get there early to kind of compensate for it. But just understand that looking at the clock, even if you don't mean to, kind of gives off that vibe that you're really not wanting to be there. You'd rather be somewhere else. And even looking over someone's shoulder, even if there isn't a clock there, instead of looking at them, kind of gives that same impression. Frowning or scowling, I don't think I see that here today, but I have encountered that before. And it's usually an indication, even very, very subconscious, that you're not happy with something. Perhaps you're disagreeing with the speaker. Now, I didn't want to get too long. I know we're a quarter of already, so I'm going to just open things up for questions. And let's see here. As I said, there is a survey link on there for feedback on my talk today. But who wants to ask the first question? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I know you speak a lot about professional image, like, I guess generally for us, it's applicable more maybe to like a business setting or even like something like that. And on the other hand, like for, like you mentioned, like more IT stuff or more, startup style stuff, more like, like software things where things are usually a bit more casual. Like how could we, what is your advice on like, still being professional but also like fitting into the more like casual environment itself?
Okay, like business casual kind of thing, like the company polo with the swag, and like khakis and nice pair of shoes. I would say follow the dress code first of all. I mean, it might be a minor thing, but I've encountered when I've looked at the women's clothing versus men's clothing, and there is often a difference. I've actually laughed at, the men get jealous when women got to wear skirts and they couldn't wear shorts. The men engineers, back when I worked in IT, were like, wait a minute, she can wear a skirt and capri pants, but I can't wear shorts? Oh, I'm like, well, I got better legs. But that's really not the answer. The answer has to do more with the fact that they designed that dress code to keep people from being distracted. Obviously, you don't want to wear too low a top or too short a skirt. I'm not trying to be sexist, but let's face it, there are women in this room. We probably don't have an issue with it, although you might be distracting someone who's jealous. That has happened. But honestly, yeah, dress the part for your job. If you're interviewing, take it up a notch. They always say dress for the next role you want to have. If you might be the engineer in charge right now, but you want to be the manager, and you're interviewing for a position like that, you want to make sure you're suited up, even though you wouldn't normally wear a suit in your casual environment. But for the interview, you definitely do. Obviously, I'm dressed in a skirt and a blouse and a sweater for you ladies. Normally, I'm in a dress, heels, and a beauty coat, and it may not sound comfortable, but that is what is considered Mary Kay dress code when we're interacting with our clients. And I've done a test. I sell more when I'm in a skirt than I wear pants. I don't know why, considering I'm dealing with women, but there's this level of respect and professionalism that seems to go with certain clothing. So yes, you can wear comfortable flat shoes and the khakis and the polo if you want to. If the company allows you to, when you have a client coming in, let's say you have a conference with, the engineers would often have clients come in to explain their software and the setup and what have you, and then they'd leave, and the engineers would go back to work. But the days that we knew a client was coming in, all of a sudden the engineers were in button-down shirts and ties and slacks with belts and shiny shoes. The only reason is they knew that the client was going to judge them on their appearance, sad as it is. And honestly, as long as you are kept well, yes, a casual work dress environment is fine. And you probably will want to be more comfortable, especially if you're standing or you're pulling long hours or you're, oh God, I think there was a server room that you had to fight to get the boards out. And you would not want to be in frilly, sweet looking clothing when you're doing that. You wanted to be in something durable that if it accidentally got the corner caught on your sleeve wasn't going to tear it to shreds or worse, cut you. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, next question? Yes.
How do you set yourself apart from others who are trying to do this same thing, like either with a resume or even when you're having an interview or just a one-on-one interaction?
Take a peek at my business card. It's a perfect example. There are 3 things that the photographer I worked with on that card suggested to me to make it different. He said, make sure you have your picture, because most of the cards come on Mary Kay Corporate for starting consultants are very generic. They have pictures of the bottles, or the MK logo, or nothing. And he says, if you're handing this out to a complete stranger, they're not going to remember you. But if they have this image, they can, when you call them, oh yeah, you, I remember you. And the reason we had it, so I was posed with one of my clients, it's so that any customer can envision themselves interacting with me in that card. It's vertical because it's different. Most business cards are horizontal. I didn't want to have that standard real estate agent in a square. I just felt that didn't really work for me. I wanted to have them see me in action, basically. And lastly, I took the time not only to have some of my credentials on the front and contact information, but if you notice the back, I'm not stupid. People use technology. I've got my QR code, my Twitter, my Facebook. I want to make sure that they can connect with me easy. Some people like to leave the back blank so that when they're networking, they can write on the back of their card. Honestly, if they really need to talk to me, they can send me a text. And I think the reason I do that is because I wanted to stand out and be different. I can wear bright colored clothing, I can have a gimmick, but depending on what your profession is, and you need to be prepared when you're meeting with your client. As I was saying earlier, knowing different personality types. If you know already ahead of time your customer or your co-worker or your boss is right on the dime every time, never late, very quick, wants to get through everything, bullet points really quickly, you need to match that because that's the level they communicate at. If you find that this person who's always running late has to talk for about 5 minutes about their kids and wants to make sure everyone's got a cup of coffee before you all get started, make sure that you relate to that. Make sure that you're connecting on that level. People appreciate it when you can match their personality. I'm not saying be like them, and you don't have to be constantly like them, but when you reflect it back, they're going to remember and notice. One of my favorite things my director taught me was, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Use them proportionately. Listen. You're doing a lot of listening today because I'm doing a lot of talking today, but normally when I interact with my customer, I ask a couple questions and I shut up. I have my water or something to keep my mouth occupied. I'll chew on my pen if I have to. But I need to hear what's going on in her head. I don't read minds. And when she's done, I ask anything else. And if there's anything else she forgot to tell me, that's when it'll come out. And I make a couple of notes. I don't constantly take notes, but I jot down a handful of things and I make sure she knows that I'm just doing this so I don't forget. And she'll appreciate months down the road when she calls and says, what foundation was I using again? Hold on. Pull out the card. Oh, you were an Ivory Fourth. Oh, great. Thanks. I ran out and threw the bottle out and completely forgot. Because I took the time to listen to her. Because I took the time to make sure she knew that I was really focused on her. So preparedness, sometimes, doing something slightly non-conventional is allowed, as long as you stay, within a certain comfort zone. And also understanding who you're talking to and really making sure you're matching them. Usually within the first minute or so, if you can figure it out. There are several assessments out there. One's called BANK, one's called DISC. All the letters stand for stuff. But whatever system works for you to better interact with other people, you're going to stand out in the sense that they're going to notice that you pay attention, that you care, and you catch on very quickly. The less time you have to ramp up, the better, honestly. Now, hopefully you're appreciating what I'm saying. You're pretty young still. Have you all landed jobs yet, or are you still in the process of finishing up your last couple of years of school? Are you interning? Okay. You'll find it more once you're in the field. But definitely, this is where, again, those consultants come in handy, an image consultant, to really take time to look over you and your brand and to make sure whatever it is that you're trying to convey, that message is coming across. Next question. I think I saw at least one other hand go up there. Yes?
I think one issue that a lot of women have is being able to balance personability as well as professionalism, right? Like, for example, when a man is interviewing, he can crack jokes and they'll see this guy is really personable, I want to hire him. But for a woman in the same situation, it seems almost unprofessional or disrespectful. And I wondered how, when you're approaching an interview, how do you manage that balance of you want to hire me because I'm good at what I do, but also I'm a good person for this job,
I would always say initially that resume is the first thing they're going to use to filter you out from someone else. Just make sure that your credentials, that your skills, that the things that make you amazing show up on that resume. Or if you're using LinkedIn, I highly recommend keeping that up to date. Another thing that makes you stand out that's important for that, do you blog? Do you post comments online? Various women's organizations online or in person? I think that, if people can see that you're published or that you have knowledge beyond your basic training, they're going to see that you're an asset and a value. And you want to make sure they're aware that you have those skills. So maybe you don't want to crack a joke unless you feel it's tasteful. Again, that's the whole be aware of not being offensive. But I think in the end, it's more important to show them that you're not a cookie cutter piece of paper resume, that there's more to you than what's printed on that paper. And that's, again, where you focus on your talents, focus on your strengths, whatever that happens to be. Does that help? Okay, good. Anyone else? Did everyone get a little red ticket? Okay, great. I'm going to take a second and pull a couple of names.
I did not.
Okay, just a second. Let me give you one. Anyone else missing one? Okay. There you go. And you. And we need one more. Excellent. This is something I do at my appointments. As a little thank you for people coming and